Now, she dressed the world from China to Chelsea. Tributes have been paid to the fashion designer Dame Vivienne Westwood after her death at the age of 81. The legendary designer made a name for herself as the Queen of Punk in the 1970s, going on to dress some of the biggest stars in fashion and building a multi-million-dollar fashion empire. Well, Tamara Cincik is founder and CEO of the fashion think tank Fashion Roundtable. Good to have you on the programme with us, Tamara. So, Vivienne Westwood, really an icon of British fashion. What has her influence been on the global industry?
Thank you for having me on the show. I think it's very important to note that she ran an independent label. It was never bought out, as other labels have been, by larger conglomerates. So she certainly danced and ran her business to her own values and her own tune. Obviously, she started famously with the punk era in the 70s, but she continued through several recessions, both in the UK and globally, and always had a very loyal following from her customers. And I think they also bought into the values that she had, someone that espoused liberty and increasingly worked in climate activism towards the end of her life.
And her brand is really known around the world, isn't it? Shops in many countries, including China, for example. How would you assess its global value?
It's always had, I've noticed in the industry, a very loyal following from the Chinese consumer. You see a lot of people going into the flagship in London who've come over from China to buy pieces. And I think what's really interesting about the brand is it had its own kind of vernacular language. So I'm wearing a jacket by Vivienne Westwood, and you can definitely see that there are themes running through her pieces. Not only the punk aesthetic, but also the pirates with the buckled shoes and the way that you wore a certain kind of sloppy t-shirt, and then the corseting. And I think that people, and the kilts, but they're very mini. So there's that kind of British classical fabrics like tweed or tartan, but then, you know, the design is completely offset with a punk aesthetic, kind of irreverence. So I think that loyalty, also she made beautiful accessories and perfumes. So she has a very loyal following, and I don't think it can be underestimated.
So her own aesthetic, then, is that what's helped her stay relevant for so long? I mean, she's just been a fixture, hasn't she, in the fashion world for so many years?
I think I've been thinking about this today, and I think what's really interesting is that she definitely attracted people who might have been a bit of an outsider, and made them feel welcome and part of a community, and wasn't afraid to stand up and speak about things, you know. Although she famously dressed as Mrs. Thatcher for a cover of a magazine when Mrs. Thatcher was still in power, she also was quite irreverent in how she dressed when she collected her gong from the Queen, or, you know, when she met Mrs. Thatcher or other politicians. She went to David Cameron's house, close to his house, in a tank, and she stood up for justice politically and environmentally. So I think that people who maybe might not have felt part of a more kind of corporate fashion industry definitely felt a part of what she had to say, and I think that's what keeps you current and attractive as well. If you're constantly pushing boundaries. I mean, famously, I've had her press release from her in the wake of her death yesterday, and she's talking about capitalism, and that's a very radical place for a designer to be, and I think that that's part of why people are so loyal to her.
So what do you think her legacy will be? How will she be remembered?
Hopefully, we'll see. I mean, I note that Matty Boven, who's a young British designer, is definitely someone I see in the kind of lineage of the work that she created at her own house and label. I think that she definitely set the benchmark very high for understanding British design, fabrication and history, and then mixing it up and making it more current and therefore accessible but also desirable, like what she did with corsets, but also what she did with those famous pirate boots that you'll see many pictures of Kate Moss wearing over the years. And I think that those pieces are still attractive. They still feel fresh, and I don't think that it's certainly not been a one-hit wonder. We've had 50 years nearly now of her being in the industry, and given that she's just brought in Jeff Banks, who was one of her early heroes as one of the directors of the company, I don't see it going anywhere anytime fast.
Tamara Cincik from Fashion Roundtable, good to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.